Welcome to another installment in the Ancillary Withdrawal Service video series. I'm Carla Licio from the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse and the Managed Care Technical Assistance Center, also known as CASA MCTAC. And with me today is the Medical Director of OASIS, Dr. Charles Morgan.
Hi, I am Charlie Morgan, and I'm very pleased to be with you here today to talk about ancillary withdrawal services, and thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, for joining us. Together, we will cover important aspects of the OASIS clinical practice guidance for ancillary withdrawal services, as well as the workflow of this practice from the staffing perspective. Dr. Morgan, I wonder if you could start us off with talking about the importance of this initiative within the OASIS agenda.
This is an initiative that I think can really enhance treatment and can provide an enhancement in recovery for the individual person. It's a service that can be overlaid on top of existing services. Doesn't really change the existing services, but it gives people a better chance at recovery, makes people more comfortable, and is just the right thing to do.
I love that, the right thing to do. I also think that this is part of what I understand from listening to you and to others at OASIS. This is an important element of building capacity to provide withdrawal management services throughout the OASIS system. Is that correct?
That's correct. This should be able to be implemented really in any existing OASIS service. It's not a thing that needs its own separate place,
right.
and so it should allow the patient actually to be more participatory in treatment. Right. And to be able to benefit from group therapy, individual therapy, outside mutual supports, and does build capacity, as you say, so that we can address the needs of more New Yorkers.
Which is an important goal.
Huge.
So, to summarize, this is a service that seeks to stabilize the patient through safe and effective management of mild to moderate or protracted withdrawal symptoms.
That's
correct. Does
correct.
that make sense?
That is correct.
Okay. With the ultimate goal of engaging the patient successfully in treatment so that they can get better and have better outcomes.
That's correct.
Dr. Morgan, I'm aware that OASIS has put out practice guidelines for ancillary withdrawal service. I think it would be useful for providers to hear from you some of the highlights of that guidance.
Sure.
How about that? We go through some of the highlights.
Absolutely. Really, in 2010, we issued some practice guidance. Actually, at that time, people had been doing this, and we always thought that this was a service that really anybody ought to be able to provide. But through various federal stipulations, OASIS. We needed to be able to certify that the practices that people were doing were safe.
Right.
And so what we did was what we have done is we've produced some guidance that addresses how people can treat mild to moderate withdrawal in an outpatient setting, and that will always err on the side of safety.
Safety is a critical element of this.
Right. And the other thing that is a critical element of this is that this is always the physician's or the mid-level's decision about whether or not a particular patient really can be treated and should be treated this way, whether the service is indicated or whether a different level of care is indicated, for instance, in an 816 or some other kind of a level of care. So while the ancillary withdrawal itself is an institutional decision, and the guidance specifies an application process that would come to OASIS from the institution, in each individual patient's case, it is a physician-driven decision.
So it's very much doctor-led.
Correct.
Got it.
Yep.
How about which particular substances this service targets? Does the guidance speak to that?
That's a very, very good point, Carla, because really any substance that has a withdrawal syndrome associated with it, should be able to be treated at this level of care. I think one of the things we often think about now is opioid withdrawal, because we are in the midst of, at this time, an opioid crisis, but we will be in the midst of another crisis in the future as well. I'm not diminishing the impact of the opioid crisis when I say that. But the other thing to remember is that when patients come in, although we don't have the diagnosis anymore of polysubstance use, many people have used more than one substance. And so while a patient may need treatment for opioid use disorder, for the withdrawal associated with that, they may also have alcohol withdrawal. And many of our patients have opioid use and benzodiazepine use. And so sedative withdrawal could be something that could be treated in an ancillary withdrawal process. Alcohol withdrawal, if it's of a mild to moderate severity, can be treated in an ancillary withdrawal process. And it'll make the patient more comfortable. It will actually lower complications and make treatment easier for everyone, including the patient.
So what ancillary withdrawal service addresses is the withdrawal symptoms. It doesn't matter what substance is producing those withdrawal symptoms.
Good point. Yep, that's well stated.
How about safety? I know you've said it a couple of times. Is that addressed in the guidance?
Yes, always err on the side of safety, so that if somebody has a history of more severe withdrawal, and it's expected that that person will have that more severe withdrawal again, then that would not be a person probably that you would let me put it in a different, that would be a person that you would refer on to a different level of care, to a more intense level of care. If a person has a co-occurring disorder, like a co-occurring mental health disorder or a co-occurring physical disorder that requires immediate attention or monitoring, that would not be a person who would necessarily be appropriate for ancillary withdrawal services. If a person is even though a CWA in our guidance, it specifies that the CWA should be less than 15. But on the other hand, when we brought this up with other experts, if the CWA is 15, but it's on its way up, that's a much different thing than if the CWA was on its way down from 15. Or if the CWA is 15, for instance, and the person has a positive alcohol level, that's a much different thing. So while the guidance may say CWA of 15, that is only guidance. And we expect that people who are doing this, practitioners, physicians who are doing this, will be experts and be able to decide on what is safe for this particular patient. And we always want people to err on the side of safety. In addition, when we're talking about environment that the patient needs to go to after the patient goes home, that should be taken into account. All of those things should be taken into account.
So it needs to be individualized. It needs to be safe.
Absolutely.
And the individual practitioner's expertise and clinical judgment comes into play.
That's exactly right.
And that I also am hearing that the guidance is not asking in any way for a provider to deliver a service that is outside what would be safe on an outpatient basis.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And a continuation of that is integration into treatment. Is that spoken to in the guidance?
Yes, yes. All of the other things that need to be done for a patient, because this is an overlay on another level of care, need to be happening, so that the patient should be involved in group therapy, individual therapy. They should be referred to mutual support groups. If they need wraparound services in the community, those things should be provided. And in addition to that, treatment planning should be done, which may include the medication management in this particular case, but it should have normal, usual treatment goals, and those processes, shouldn't be disrupted by this. They actually should be enhanced by this, which is what I find so exciting.
Right. Dr. Morgan, within that, could you speak some to the role of the guidance in terms of the construction of the service within a clinic? Is the guidance prescriptive, Or is this something that provides road markers for a clinic to use?
We get asked that question a lot, so I'm glad you asked that question. It is road markers. All of our programs that have physicians, medical directors in those programs are ASAM certified, ABAM certified, have APA certification as a specialist, psychiatric specialist in addiction, or AOA. The American Osteopathic Association certification in addiction, and we really respect that. And so we think that those particular, for instance, a protocol, and that's not something I'm going to specify. I want those individualized to the patient. Now, I do have to approve protocols so that we know that what is happening is safe.
You being Oasis.
Yes, but for instance, some of our providers might want to use phenobarbital for alcohol stabilization. Some of our providers might want to use Librium. Some might want to use Ativan. I'm using trade names here on purpose, actually, okay, not to plug any particular company or anything like that.
We'll highlight that underneath.
There you go. But those kinds of things need to be done on an individual basis in a way that will work for the institution. Similarly, I expect that organizations will come up with policies for vital signs that will make sense. You know, we can talk more about, you know, what the guidance specifies if you want to, but they're road markers.
They're road markers. Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's a really good summary of the guidance. I think what would be useful now that I'm sure providers watching this would like to know more about the actual workflow in the clinic. And I know that you and I have prepared to talk about a generic workflow. But I also know that you have experience rolling out this service in a clinic.
Yes.
And I think it would be really useful for people to hear about what that experience is like and what people may expect.
Well, you know,
Can you speak to that?
I can, and I would love to speak to that. Actually, the joy is in the journey, you know,
Yes.
and so when we started the journey in my clinic, there was a lot of apprehension. I had done this in other settings before, but in the place where I work right now, it had not been done before, and so I was asking the staff to do something that was unfamiliar to them, and as the medical director in that facility, I feel like I have a responsibility to help. And so nurses, for instance, we did this in a setting where there were nurses. So the nurses wanted to know a couple of things, and I really respect what they wanted to know. They wanted to know that I knew what I was doing.
Oh, wow, what an important point.
Isn't that?
They needed to have confidence in the leadership.
Exactly. And they wanted to know that what I was doing would be safe for the patients. And they wanted to know what would happen if there was an untoward, unexpected event that occurred. So we needed to establish all of those things. So education, we needed to do education. We needed to trust each other as well. I needed to help the nurses to know not only how to administer and what to look for with vital signs, but I needed to help them to understand when to call me. And you know, that process has evolved. So that initially, what I needed to be prepared for was that they were going to call me pretty frequently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I like to teach. It's a good thing, and we're teaching. And so the medical part of the thing was an evolving process. Now you know what happens, Carla? It's the most amazing, rewarding thing. Now the nurse, I happen to use phenobarbital. That's my own personal preference. Now you know what happens? The nurses call me up and say, they call me Charlie, okay? I know you're calling me Dr. Morgan, and I respect that. However, they call me up and they say, Charlie, I think you need some phenobarb. What a great thing.
That's
the
great.
Nurses are picking up on
Right.
these kinds of things.
Right.
So it wasn't just a one-time thing either. It was an evolving process where we had to have several sessions, both individually and didactically, actually, and interactive. Now the counselors, that was another thing. They needed all that information as well. But the counselors needed to because they were the people who had been used to really being the primary influence on the treatment in that facility. And so all of a sudden this doctor comes in who wants to have another kind of influence that's going to really influence whether and within the milieu. When other patients saw some of my patients taking medication that they weren't getting, we had to be prepared to address all of that stuff. So the milieu was one issue, and then the counselors needed to understand, and I needed to understand, that we needed to work as a team. Because what we're not trying to do is have two different professionals that are respected within the milieu, providing two different kinds of instructions. That would have caused and created opportunities for triangulation and all sorts of other things with the patients. And so the operationalization was really becoming a team. You know what? And I think in doing that and becoming a team around ancillary withdrawal, what we have done in that facility, and I'm very proud of this as well, and proud of my staff really, that's what I'm proud of, is that we have become a team in everything else that we do as well.
Yes, I bet.
So it's been a thing where it's really been good for us.
Thank you again for watching the first half of our conversation with Dr. Morgan. This video reviewed the clinical practice guidance for ancillary withdrawal and captured some of Dr. Morgan's real-world experience with this service. We continue our conversation with Dr. Morgan in Chapter 4 of the Ancillary Withdrawal series, where we discuss implementation and workflow. We hope you take advantage of all of the videos in this series. Thank you again for watching.